Hello everyone, welcome to the Scottish National Galleries. My name is Lucy and I'm a digital content producer here at the Galleries, and welcome. I'm totally delighted to see almost a full house actually, so thank you for coming on a Tuesday lunchtime, and also welcome to all of those joining online today. This is a very special event. It is a live streaming of our 3 queer films from our series Not Seeing Straight. Some of you might have seen them before on our YouTube channel. Some of you, this might be the first time that you've seen them. So we are delighted to share all of these films with you. They were published last year, and since then they have proved incredibly popular, having now surpassed over 1 million views, which to some of you might be like, well, that's not loads, but for the National Galleries of Scotland, that is incredible. That is like proper, yes, thank you, that is a... So we are really delighted by that, and we just really want to celebrate and keep the engagement and keep the visibility and keep the conversations going, and that is why we are holding this event today. It's great to see people are still coming in. So as I said, the films will be shown back to back. So it's 3 films, so running time just under half an hour. Following that, we will have a panel discussion with 3 incredible panellists who I will introduce following the films. Please remember there will be time for questions at the end as well, so do think about them during the films, and also if you're online, please feel free to post your questions. I do want to highlight that this is a safe space, it's an inclusive space, and we absolutely do not accept transphobia, homophobia, racism, or any kind of prejudice. So please all bear that in mind for today. So for now, I will stop talking and let the films talk to you. So please enjoy, and we'll speak to you afterwards. Cheers.
This is the work of Duncan Grant, British landscape painter, textile designer, and member of the Bloomsbury Group. That's his public-facing work. But Grant's artwork had another side to it. This side was discovered last year, hidden for decades under a friend's bed, a secret collection of erotic drawings.
A portfolio of 422 mostly erotic drawings.
They're gorgeous, but they are really explicit.
This archive passed through channels of queer affection, I suppose, so from lovers to friends.
It's very much something that was just meant for people who are very close to him.
They're erotica, they weren't meant for a wider audience.
They were found in a folder marked, "These drawings are very private. Please give them to Edward Labasse to do what he likes with them."
That material has now come to a museum, a gallery, and has been preserved, but for decades it was hidden. It was presumed destroyed at some point, but actually cared for by a channel of lovers and friends.
If you look at art's stories and histories, they've been told from perspectives that are almost entirely straight, cisgendered, white. But LGBTQ+ artists have always existed, and so has LGBTQ+ art. Art history is full of hidden queer artworks, ready to be resurfaced, researched, and recontextualized. So why was queer art hidden in the first place? How do we go about resurfacing it? And why is it so important that we do? As we know, explicitly queer artworks have historically been hidden because of societal laws and religious prejudice.
Homosexuality was a prosecutable offence.
Homosexuality was still criminalised in Scotland in 1980, a full 13 years later than a decriminalisation in England.
Even after decriminalisation took effect in '81, a law called Section 28 continued queer repression.
Any public authority funding could not be associated with the so-called promotion of homosexuality. Exhibitions weren't going ahead. Mapplethorpe and others had their work censored.
Of course, this repression runs throughout our history.
So those kind of personal, individual narratives are often not represented.
It's to do with self-censorship, it's to do with the ways that art has been spoken about, written about and interpreted in the past.
So in order to find LGBTQ+ art throughout history, and you will find it, you need to delve into collections of letters, journals, and private sketchbooks. By their nature, these kinds of hidden artworks are way more expressive and intimate than public-facing paintings and sculptures.
You know, there's things that you would write in a diary or photographs that you might exchange with a partner that you would never show to the public.
They're usually much more spontaneous, much more kind of liberated and joyful perhaps than finished artworks.
For example, artists like Joan Eardley, an iconic painter of Scottish landscapes.
When you look at an early landscape on the wall, you don't really get that sense of a creator in the same way that if you read letters written by her. They're overflowing with kind of intimacy and frankness about her life and the fact that her happiness really had an effect on her artwork. So when she was miserable, when she was going through kind of personal turmoil with various friends and lovers, it really reflected in her art.
Queer art can also be uncovered in niche special book collections with limited print runs. Claude Cahen's work was expressive, playful and subversive, playing with gender identities, but it was largely forgotten until the 80s, when their work was rediscovered by a researcher.
A French artist, photographer, poet, revolutionary.
She started dressing androgynously, she shaved her head, she adopted this kind of indeterminate pseudonym.
Almost like prefiguring trans, non-binary, gender fluid discussions today.
Sort of dressing up, role play, lots of surreal aspects and elements like mirrors sort of brought in.
She worked very closely with her stepsister and lover, Marcel Moore.
They were able to do whatever they wanted and present it in whatever way they felt they wanted to, and not feel like they had an audience to act up to. And I think because of that, you get these more sort of surreal and wild explorations of identities.
In most instances, art's queer identities were literally physically hidden in sketchbooks, attics, and limited print runs. But in some cases, it was hidden in plain sight.
Anne Lister was a landowner, a businesswoman, and a lesbian in 19th century England.
Lister is this sort of incredible model for a discovery of this almost like hinterland that is lying beneath the whole of our history.
There's pages and pages of diaries, amounting to about 5 million words of text. There's some material in the diaries which is coded. So she devised her own code, which is a mixture of Greek and, I think, algebraic terms, to discuss sensitive material and often about her own lesbian relationships.
In a recent visit that I made to Anne Lister's home, I could visit that place as a sort of regular country house, but going into the bedroom of Anne Lister and imagining lesbian sex you know, at that particular time in history, I mean, it does add a different dimension.
But for most contemporary art researchers and artists, the problem isn't unlocking the secret of coded LGBTQ+ artwork. It's actually finding them in the first place. So how do you go about tracking down hidden histories?
It's really a matter of hunting down material.
For me, it starts with a really creepy thing, and it's going to look at their wills. If you can't find very much in archives, then you can sort of track down family members. They've then got a batch of letters that then tells you about another friend, and then, you know, you sort of end up putting these sort of webs of people together.
Researching queer artwork, of course, comes with many challenges. Often when researchers do acquire material, it comes under an embargo.
Embargoes is a huge thing.
Basically saying that the material will be given to you, but you can't let anyone see it for a certain amount of time. 10 years, 20 years, or after the death of the creator.
And that's only if researchers are able to access it at all.
It's often the case that material doesn't reach us because it's been destroyed, either by the creator themselves, if it's felt to be too intimate or revealing, or often too by the families of creators who perhaps thought that that material wasn't suitable for a wider audience.
Take George Platt-Lynes, a fashion photographer working in the 30s and 40s.
George Platt-Lynes made his living really as a fashion photographer and as a photographer of theatre and ballet, but his real interest was in photographing the male nude. Of course, this is something that, unless it was done in a very straight manner, it was something that just couldn't be shown publicly.
He actually burned the majority of his prints and negatives, whilst dying of lung cancer in 1954. But a collection of over 600 negatives was purchased by the Kinsey Institute, surviving to this day. This kind of preservation shows the impact of the rediscovery of hidden histories. His work was hugely influential to subsequent queer artists, particularly one Robert Mapplethorpe. Cases like these raise all sorts of moral quandaries. Who gets to decide if a historic artist's inner feelings are exposed to the world? what counts as being in the public interest, is it okay to retrospectively out an artist? Or is that actually more like adding misrepresented groups back in?
Does he ever want us to see this? It's like someone going into like finding your porn stash and being like, look at all this. Hundreds and thousands of people can now look at them online. Did he ever think that was going to happen? Probably not, no.
And of course, it's difficult to make assumptions one way or the other about how someone from the past might identify, what role that plays in their work, and our reading of it. Art histories are constantly being evaluated, with new readings challenging past conventions and understandings of an artist and their work. New hidden histories are always emerging, reshaping how we understand our history.
Archivists today, and museum curators as well, are very much more aware of the silences in their collections, what is missing.
You know, these experiences have always been there. We just need to find them.
It's these pioneers that opened the way for later generations.
Heteronormativity is still the default. Challenging it is our responsibility and is beneficial for everyone.
And through all this, the hidden histories of queer art become an integral part of the history of art. If you look closely at artworks and portraits of certain Victorians, you might notice a recurring image. Green carnations attached to the lapel of a jacket.
Green carnation was something that Oscar Wilde brought into the public.
A signifier of their identity, and encouraged his circle of friends also to wear the green carnation. There was a special shop in London where you could get green carnations from. They were dyed green, they weren't a natural green colour.
Most people would always go for a white carnation, but a green one is something very strange, very queer.
But these flowers are just one example of the many visual symbols throughout history that hinted at secret sexualities and identities that had been hidden. So, what other coded symbols can we find in the history of queer artwork? How did today's artists reference and reuse them? And how have hidden symbols transitioned to a wider and more expressive queer visual language? Around the same time as the green carnation, there was another queer symbol in use too.
Peacock feathers as a sort of symbol of queer identities.
Because it's the male peacock that has incredibly flamboyant tail feathers. Check out this painting of the couple Charles Ricketts and Charles Shannon by Edmund Dulac. They're painted as medieval saints, but Shannon is holding a peacock feather, juxtaposing religious imagery with this knowing symbol.
We see people holding them and looking out into the viewer to make some sort of connection.
Peacock feathers were commonly used in Art Nouveau at the time. They're seen in Whistler's famous Peacock Room and recur through Aubrey Beardsley's black and white artworks. Nowadays, we have plenty of ways of anonymously communicating our sexual desires with different tribes. But on the dance floors of 1970s San Francisco, men relied on a secret visual code.
A handkerchief hanging from a pocket.
Men would wear different coloured handkerchiefs to denote their sexual interests.
You can't really get into examples of the hanky code without getting a different certificate.
Of course, peacock feathers, handkerchiefs, carnations are but a few of the many, many queer symbols throughout history. All sorts of different shapes, colours and hidden meanings.
There have always been coded messages in clothing, in badges and so on and so forth.
There's the nautical star tattoo.
Commonplace in lesbian communities.
The lambda symbol.
Designed by the Gay Activist Alliance in the early 1970s. In science, represents energy.
There's one inspired by an animal.
My favourite one is the lavender rhinoceros, which has a red heart. It emerged in the US, I believe in Boston, in the mid-1970s. Symbolises strength and resilience against adversity, because it's a much maligned animal.
But some queer symbols emerge from less celebratory, more defiant beginnings. One of the most powerful and iconic subversions of imagery was the pink triangle, which was reappropriated from its use in Nazi concentration camps.
It was sewed on people's uniforms when they were in prison to identify them as gay men in the concentration camps. There was other triangles as well. There was a black triangle, for example, that identified antisocial behaviour, and that included lesbians among them. In a way, it's been reclaimed by the communities in the same way that the word queer has been reclaimed.
In the mid-80s, there was a campaign called Silence Equals Death,
where they took that pink triangle and flipped it.
That campaign was addressing the silence around the AIDS epidemic in both media and government at the time.
There was thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people that weren't being represented.
Historical artists have also frequently used the guise of classical or mythological identity to smuggle in references to LGBTQ+ sentiments and feelings. Comparatively to the Middle Ages, antiquity was a time of acceptance. Queer people might not have had the labels that we do today, but its freer, more open attitudes towards sexualities made ancient Greece and Rome a touchstone that artists throughout history returned to.
Those people had found the vehicle in which to put their desire, kind of smuggle it into the thing that's existing and already allowed.
Was it sanctioned by history and by great literature? It allowed the artist to sort of perhaps dwell on the beauty of the male figure. You can say, well, you know, that's Hadrian and Antinous, or that's Achilles and Patroclus, or from the Bible, David and Jonathan.
So artists use these figures, like Simeon Solomon's depiction of Sappho, a Greek poet from Lesbos, from which the word lesbian is derived, a sensual depiction of two women in embrace, dress slipping off a shoulder, two birds mimicking their form from behind. But it isn't just visual artworks in which queer code was used. From the 30s to the 60s, a vernacular slang called Polari was used by gay men.
Polari is a form of slang language, which took words from lots of different places.
There was around 500 to 600 words documented.
From Yiddish, from slang terms used by circus performers, wrestlers apparently, merchant sailors too, and it was adopted by gay circles.
Particularly gay men communicating with each other without risk.
There are some words still used today that actually originated from Polari.
Cottaging and cruising, which have particular connotations to them. But there are words like naff, which is a word from Polari.
Which just goes to show the legacy of these kinds of codes.
Malone tried to give her an Irish multi-palaver. Pauline told her to shove a shackle up her kiver.
So, a variety of visual and linguistic codes can be seen throughout history, hinting at queer experiences and inner lives. But is there also a broader visual language that runs through history? Is there such thing as a queer aesthetic?
It's hard to sort of say what a queer aesthetic is without stereotyping someone, I think.
There isn't any one experience.
Queerness is something that's difficult to describe.
It's multitudinous. There are lots of voices with different lived experiences and different opinions trying to be expressed.
Aesthetics change with time.
We are every colour in the spectrum, aren't we?
Nonetheless, throughout art's history, LGBTQ+ artists have been inspired by their predecessors. So there are themes and motifs that emerge.
Because we don't see many images which represent us, we have to find ourselves. We have to reappropriate the imagery that exists.
There is a way in which material and imagery is recycled.
And so they are there in our DNA without us necessarily directly referring to them.
Whether it's the use of a certain colour or certain types of fashion.
Images of kind of camp or drag.
I associate it with otherness in a way, anything that is not societal norm or the heteronormative.
Maybe there's a gaydar in painting.
Of course, there are specific aesthetics and subcultures within the broader LGBTQ+ umbrella, like flowers, which recur from Gluck's coded still lives, to the floral compositions of Carl van Vechtem's photography of Harlem residents in the 30s and 40s, to Mapplethorpe's black and white flower since legal changes have, in recent decades, made the lives of queer people more open and free, so too has the art produced by LGBTQ+ artists. The world of queer art opened up, becoming bolder, louder, and more mainstream.
There's less requirement for people to use those symbols, those codes, which in essence were there to protect people.
And yet, if you look close, those secret codes and aesthetics are still there.
It is interesting, even being in times when you potentially can be more overt and are more overt. Again, it does seem to be something of fascination and something which comes quite naturally to slide in a reference. People will read it when they know what it is, but for others it might pass them by.
For today's artists, really it's about exploring, analysing and challenging the visuals that have defined queer culture of the past.
When we come to try to find our own language, how do we do that? How can we identify an authentic voice when everything that we are is developed as a consequence of everything that we see and everything that we know and all the expectations which are placed on us, etc.?
We are all formed by the cultures that make us. And maybe it's these figures from the past, maybe it's these like myths, maybe it's other people who've made something before. And the way that I like to work with that when I get it is to kind of pick it apart and like to talk about both like the histories that form us and the kind of shortcomings of those histories.
I thought I want to try to make some images which try to deal with that, try to deal with the difficulty of that.
And so, secret languages are always with us, constantly evolving, resurfacing, and speaking to us.
We good to go? Fabulous.
There's this illustrator called George Quaintance who, in the mid-1900s, was churning out this amazingly homoerotic work for pulp magazines like Stolen Sweets and Tempting Tales, playing with and subverting stereotypes like gay cowboys and idyllic classical figures. Looking through this by contrast, you realise how rare it is to see such expressions of queer joy in historical fine art. Too often, we dwell on the negatives of history's LGBTQ+ artists. Dark stories, pain and repression.
We have like Keith Haring, who sadly died of AIDS, Basquiat, who died of drug abuse.
It's not just in the visual arts, but across different art forms.
But look closer and queer joy can be found, sometimes explicit, but sometimes in the abstract. Flowers, landscapes, colours and domestic scenes. So how do we find and illuminate this work? And why is it so important that we do? Okay, let's get stuck in. Let's talk about queer joy. If there's one recurrent theme in joyful queer art, it's the subversion of stereotypes. Let's start by talking about the sailor. The all-male societies of the sea were an enduring stereotype of gay masculinity. The swagger and charm of these figures in their dashing uniforms can be seen in work from pop artists like Tom of Finland, or the iconic outfits of the village people, to fine artists like Francis Cadell.
Sort of shirtless sailors wearing, hats, like really camp.
But they both go deeper than stereotype. Cadell here also showing a more sensitive individual portrait of a young sailor in an intimately observed study. Meanwhile, Valentine Penrose used subversions of Gothic settings to explore celebrations of lesbian love.
Novels with a lot of lesbian themes in them. Letters or poems or snippets of dialogue from one woman to another. And they're all like full of love and loss.
Hiding queer narratives in fantastical settings. Even the word queer is itself a subversion, a way in which the gay, lesbian, bi, trans and intersex communities have reclaimed a derogatory phrase. These kinds of subversions can be seen from the mid-20th century onwards.
I think that was a really catalytic moment. Where are the artists and where are the activists, and how are those boundaries fudged there?
That was about people trying to fight back.
Queer joy is a form of resistance. It is an act of resistance.
So the whole idea of like graphic impact, Guerrilla Girls, Lesbian Avengers, you're seeing these really playful, really joyful, really fantastic interventions into almost like the frame of popular culture as well as the frame of fine art representation.
So often, queer joy is about self-expression, about playing with and taking ownership of visuals and identity.
I guess as you call it appropriation, it is taking things and repurposing them. Some of my favourite artists are those who do that, people like Duchamp, Warhol.
There's subtle references that are there in people's ways of presenting themselves to the world.
I think there's an idea that you strip things away, you strip away the layers of the onion, and you will come to the core of the truth. And I don't think that's necessarily actually how we speak of truth. It's in what we perform, about the apparel that we wear and the guises that we're going to adopt. The masks tell the truth as much as anything beneath it.
Equally though, queer joy can be found in simple representation and everyday depictions.
Feeling accepted is the biggest part of it, being in control of yourself and not being under the spotlight in any way.
Artists like Hockney, for example, spoke about their work more about the authenticity, having an identity and living an identity, and that having elements of joy as part of it.
Hockney described his work as propaganda for queer love, but often his paintings take the form of more domestic, everyday scenes, like his portrait of Christopher Isherwood and Don Bachardy, simmering with sexual tension and illusions. At other times, queer love can be shown in even less direct ways.
I wouldn't normally be stopped in my tracks by a portrait of a vase of flowers, but Gluck's flower paintings and the story behind those of her relationship with the florist Constance Spry draws me towards those paintings.
Gluck was a pipe-smoking, gender-rejecting painter from the early 1900s who painted coded still lifes to express the joy of her 4-year relationship with a female florist.
I remember going to an exhibition of Gluck's work and I couldn't get enough. I didn't want to leave that room just for the reason that art, for me, had so many stories and layers to it.
Of course, today's artists can afford to be more overt in depictions of queerness. Front and centre of the Scottish National Portrait Gallery is Roxana Hall's portrait of Horst MacDonald, a truly collaborative piece.
This is the part of me I never see. This is what other people see when I sing.
She felt that something of her intimate self was there embedded in the work.
It's the joy, the excitement, the passion that comes from inside me, and I've never seen it.
When do we see an image of an older woman looking like that? Someone who is absolutely alive, vital, and saturated and rich.
Again, queer joy here comes from a place of defiance, of darkness.
Starting off, it all comes from me voicing stuff from inside, which comes from years and years ago of growing up and being chased by people, being shouted at, being spat on for being gay. I was kind of demonstrating my insides, my emotions.
So many of us know what it is to have to try to find joy when we know that we are still considered to be aberrant. We still live in those times, that's still the case.
In contemporary art, joyful defiance often comes from increasing visibility of and celebrating marginalised subcultures and people.
Anything that is not societal norm or the heteronormative, that's what I would say is the queer.
In looking at the work of Tessa Boffin, seeing the work of somebody like Olivia Plunder, whose work you can see, there's a beautiful, joyful sense there of people surviving, people thriving.
Like a queer reading of Rakib Shaw's erotically charged work, which depicts fantastical, hedonistic worlds, often populated by mythical creatures. Increasing the amount of joyous, outwardly queer art on gallery walls has a huge effect on individuals, audiences, and artists, because representing queer joy in the world of art is one step in increasing queer joy in the world that we live in.
For any minority, to see yourself depicted in culture is so important, and it makes you feel like you exist and that you matter.
It's imperative that we see people like ourselves, because those things sustain us.
I think it's showing like a full range of emotion.
A broader range of artists and sitters gives us a broader range of stories to tell.
So to find joy and to speak and to laugh and to be together, well, it's critical.
hopefully you enjoyed our 3 films there. So now I'm just going to actually, we normally have a Britney Spears microphone, but today we've got these ones. That's lots of things, so hopefully that is okay. Does everybody hear me? Fantastic. I'm assuming people online can also hear me. So yes, so now we are going to have a discussion with 3 fantastic people who I'm incredibly excited to have with us here today. So who we've got right next to me here to my left is Jules Stapleton Barnes, who hosts the Somewhere for Us podcast. Some of you might be familiar with. I see some nods, that's great. It's the LGBTQ plus arts, culture, heritage and enterprise podcast for Scotland and beyond. After adventures in radio broadcasting in her 20s, Jules has since been immersed in LGBTQ plus community development in Edinburgh since 2010. Jules joined the Somewhere team in 2018, launching the podcast in 2022, and is delighted to be bringing her worlds together to celebrate and champion our community through the click of a button. And one of your quotes that you shared with me is, "I want our podcast to shine a light on the incredible breadth of queer life in Scotland today, more diverse and complex than stereotypes could ever capture, to celebrate the power of human connection, finding your community, and a safe space where the dark and lightness of conversation leaves you feeling connected, supported, and hopeful," which is really beautiful. Next along we have, in the middle here, we have Dr. Katusha Bento, who is a lecturer in race and decolonial studies, co-director of Race Ed Network at the University of Edinburgh, and the co-founder of the Free Afro-Brazilian University. Her main inspirations are Quilombo and Samba communities, epistemologies and praxis, reaching out to Black feminists and queer subversive language to promote ethics of caring and power to the people. Guide mother, auntie of Shazara, Jackson and Chibwezi. I hope I pronounce those names okay. There we go. Are they watching? But young. Oh, not watching. Yeah, okay, no. And who we've got on the end here you might recognise from our films. Rory Douglas Bowen, or is it Bowen? Bowen, there we go. Is a Glasgow-based artist and drag performer. Their artwork has been celebrated by the BBC, the Tate and the Crotald Institute, and they have exhibited in the V&A Dundee and the Crotald Gallery. Rue completed his MA at the University of St Andrews in 2017 in art history. And as their drag persona, Rue Jazzle, have toured the UK and Europe and hosts, performs and produces events across Scotland. So I think you'll agree, we've got a fantastic group of people with us today. So I think to kick us off, I'd be really interested to hear which of our 3 films, if any, most resonates with you, or which of the themes that we explore you identify with most, and maybe the reasons as to that. So Rue, I might come to you first, seeing as you featured in our films.
Hello, I'm Eternal. Fabulous. I think I wrote some notes down here, actually. I think for me, they all resonate in different ways. I remember when I was studying an art history degree, and when I was writing my final dissertation, I was writing about queer performance art in the 60s in New York. And there is literally next to no texts about what I was looking for. The library had next to nothing, and even looking online, it's very, very difficult. And I think that's often the case throughout art history, that art history, there's so many levels of things being hidden and things covered up. And the art world can be, and through art history, has been very restrictive. And there's a lot of level of control, whether that be of women in art or of non-white people in art as well. And there often aren't the materials there. And I think it's so important that we're now having films like this that are made, that are uncovering things and that are sharing it with a wider audience. So yeah, I think that's so important, definitely.
Yeah, fantastic. Katusha, can I come to you next? Just the button. Yeah.
Hello. Hi, everyone. I'm hungry, I think. Yeah, I made some notes, actually. I think it's like the 3 films are talking about relevant aspects of this archival turn, which means this new discoveries of old documents, old notes, the letters, or even the signifiers for the community to meet, to understand each other, and to be very subversive according to the laws, to the context, to the kind of underground world that still some of us need to survive under. But what I think it's beautiful in this narrative is not just talking about the queer joy, but the queer kill joy. What a joy it is to kill the joy of the Tories. What a joy it is to kill the joy of narratives that are so oppressive, and they're killing people right now. And I say this in a very careful way. I don't mean killing, just like, it's killing. People are committing suicide, and this kind of oppressive discourses are responsible for that. And in those discourses, we're talking about the social policies, we're talking about the transphobic healthcare that we have here in NHS, for example, and we also talk about the racist narratives that very often normalize whiteness, and whenever it is not, so, you know, the black as the object or the abject for the white gaze. So when do we situate this absence of white, right? The non-white? When do we situate people of color as if white is not a color, as if white is not racialized? How are we negotiating spaces of queerness in which we can, I am being killjoy because I'm being provocative, and I'm being provocative because these things are being, continue to happen, right? It's going on right now. I'm just saying these things because I'm also inspired by Sara Ahmed. She launched her book last week. I was very happy to be there. And the killjoy kind of message is in my head. So I just wanted to give credit to Sara Ahmed, but also give credit to the queer community that had been killing joys so much. And I think these films are just important reminders, as much as important reminders that this conversation needs to continue, because I would like to see more trans people of color, black people featuring at the center, authoring our history together. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, and actually it's something we're going to come back to later in the conversation, because it is incredibly important, incredibly prevalent at the moment, as you've highlighted, Katusha. And I think it's good to provoke. It's good to have those conversations. You know, if we're shutting doors, if we're hiding, or if we're always trying to people please, which is what gets us into messes in the first place, then we're never going to get anywhere, and we're never going to have the conversations that need to be had, and we never make the progressions and the changes and the proactive movements in order to become better and more equal. So that's really beautiful, and I think we're going to look back to some of the points you've raised already, Katusha. Jules, just finish off on this question. I'm going to come to you.
Sure. Hi. I think what came to my mind when I watched all three of those films was just the absence of that artwork in my life, you know, in terms of education and thinking about, I'm seeing these things now, but there was an assumption there that all these things are really well-known queer kind of imagery and this kind of the queer aesthetic, but it wasn't available to me as a young person. And I have young people in my mind because they feature in episode 5 of the podcast, and I've been working with these 2 young people up in the Cairngorms who are living rurally in Scotland. And I don't know that they have access to any of that. And they definitely don't have access to the other narratives and the kind of different way of looking at queer joy or killing queer joy. So I'm thinking, how does that reach them? And how does queer art reach people nowadays? And I think there are new ways that that's happening. Yeah. And I definitely, the concept of queer joy being a resistance and a rebellion feels really meaningful to me at the moment in my work, working with the community. And it is so hard for some people to smile and feel good about who they are right now. So, yeah. So if we can find spaces and ways to help people relax a little bit and feel visible and feel seen and validated, then that's a good thing. Yeah. But I think that feels like it's more of an experiential thing rather than looking at images of the past.
Yeah, and I think that's, again, another very good point, because you're right, a lot of these artists or artworks that are referenced in the film probably aren't known to a lot of people, or maybe there was a handful of names in there that you were like, oh yeah, okay, I remember them, or I've heard of them before, or maybe I've seen them on an art gallery wall before. But yes, on the flip side, there's probably a lot that are completely new to people, and I think the importance of any content, whether it be a film, a podcast, a book, it's a jumping off point, isn't it? And it's trying to really highlight conversations and these topics for people to kind of continue. So actually, I want to come specifically to language now, actually, because we are all using the word queer. And the word queer is, which you would have seen and heard, is used quite a lot in our film series, and within the National Galleries of Scotland as well. We do actually use it, and we use it in a very positive way. We use it with the hope and the intention to empower and to be inclusive. However, we are aware, and we've been made even more aware since publishing our films, that the word queer, obviously, it doesn't work for a lot of people, and it can actually be very triggering, perhaps even still feels like it's very offensive. And that is something that's really important for us to acknowledge, and we are. And so it's made us really think about the importance of language and how it's ever evolving. And actually, I just want to highlight as well that one of our visitors has picked up on the title of our series as well. We went for Not Seeing Straight with the intention of seeing the world not through a heteronormative lens, and our intention was to, again, empower. However, realised that this visitor highlighted that because we put the word not in there, that could make it a negative, or we're othering, which of course was not our intention. So we just wanted to sort of acknowledge that comment as well, and we've taken it on board, and it's really part of our thought process and conversations within the gallery. So, Jules, I'm going to come back to you in the first instance, particularly, I think, starting with the word queer, and how in your work situation do people you work with identify with the word queer? Do they not identify with it? And are there reasons around as to why that is?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is how important it is we're able to have these conversations with each other about language, thinking about impact primarily, and having a conversation about intent, but thinking about impact. And that goes for lots of different words and lots of different types of language. But with the word queer, it's something that means a lot to me. It's something that means a lot to a lot of people in the community. And it also has connotations for other people in our community, older generation of people who have had different experiences of that word. And I think I have a lot of understanding around that, and I have respect for that. Speaking personally, I've come to a real realisation in my life that queer is the neatest possible way to sum up how I feel about my sexuality, my sexual orientation, but also my gender. And I can't separate those two. I can't separate those two things out, that performance that I have as a person. That I love what Roxana Halls was saying, that actually our performance tells you so much. And sometimes the masks we wear tell us so much. And I have a queer performance of myself that I'm getting to know better now. And so it's an all-encompassing word for me. And it doesn't also become about biology and sex, which I'm increasingly feeling less connected with in terms of my sexuality and my sexual orientation. So for me, personally, it's the best word. But interestingly, in conversation with the two young people up in the Cairngorms, I checked in with them about language, how they wanted me to talk about them. And both of them laughed when I said, how do you feel about the word queer? And they were like, fine. And they shut me down really quickly about it. And I said, it's interesting because other people might feel differently about that. And they were like, well, what else would you call us? So I was like, there's so many words you could use. But we had a quick conversation about the fact that one of the people I was talking to was experiencing a lot of hate at school around the word gay. So they have a very negative feeling and experience of the word gay because of what's going on in school and the way that's used in a school setting. So for them, queer felt the safest word for them. So, I think context is everything. Listening is important. Thinking about our impact with our words. But it is my word, so I'm very happy using it for me.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And it's a personal thing, isn't it? Language is always personal, and it is so often wrapped up in identity or non-identity. So I think, that's a very important point to make. Katusha, can I come to you next?
Yeah, I love talking about language. I have this Brazilian accent, as you can hear. And as I was writing my dissertation, my PhD, and that's why I came to the UK, I struggled so much with English. But the more I was understanding better through poetry, music, art, in general, I could get more engaged. And now I have a very playful approach to language. I love translations. I love the potential of translations, which is not between languages, but it's between the meanings. And that's what I think it's potent in our humanity, is to change the meanings and renegotiate what we mean in the world, what humanity means. So as a teacher who always brings this kind of art to my students, I don't have any of my students here, I don't think. Hi, beautiful. My stars. I bring art and I bring music to ground the first minutes of my classes. And I want us to have a different encounter with our sense of humanity before we try to understand whatever we're going to understand in that class, or whatever it's a concept, or really whatever. But my point here is, I believe that as we negotiate our meaning in humanity, not as biological, but as mythological, as beings of so many layers, in performativity of what are we doing here, what categories we think it's important in that particular moment, it becomes instrumental, crucial, that we renegotiate the meanings that we created long ago or we are recreating right now. So the word queer is very subversive in my understanding, to reclaim a space of humanity that before didn't exist, or it was understood as less of a human or inferior, or to this day, the queer in different contexts could mean so many things, could allow people to cause or inflict violence over other bodies. I'm not going to details, and I'm sorry, I'm pausing because I don't want to trigger any kind of negative feelings in you, but I'm just being careful in how I am addressing the kind of violence that the meaning of queer still represents in the world. So when we associate and we reclaim queerness in our identities, in our praxis, in our philosophies, in our performativity, with joy, with existence, with claiming our humanity, I think that's brilliant. So I'm happy to speak to those who might feel that's not a good word, but I'm also happy to continue using as long as it is meaningful to the community that I'm part of. I also wanted to make a reference to how we make meanings of, for example, the word gay or any word that we can represent. So it's like an invitation for us to be careful in the way we are using words with each other, to each other, and also to ourselves, mainly to ourselves. Who are we, and how we are situating ourselves sometimes when we make mistakes. Are we being careful? Are we being very present and attentive to how we address the weight of the words into the things that we do and believe? So yeah, I think this is the main aspect. As a Black woman, I understand that the N-word has been resignified by Black people in the US in ways that is beyond me because I'm Brazilian, but it is beyond us in ways that we can see joy being reproduced there. So there is so much to say about negotiating meanings and language, but the most important thing, I believe, is reclaiming the humanity and the careful space in how we do those things. So yeah, I would just leave it there.
Rue?
I think for me, words like queer were used against me in a very negative way when I was younger, going to school, and also words like gay. So I think for me, it took a long time, I guess like yourself, Jules, to kind of be comfortable with that word. But I think for me currently, I love the word queer, and I think, again, like yourself, it's a great word to describe my entire identity with my sexuality and my gender. And I think also in terms of an umbrella term for the whole LGBTQ plus community. It's also quicker as well than saying that all those letters. I love the word queer, but I also understand that for especially older people, exactly. For older people, there are much more negative, and there's a very like visceral response to that word from past experiences for their entire life of having that word used against them. But again, language, it's ever changing, it's evolving, and it differs from person to person, and also geographically. I mean, I've done youth work with young queer people across Europe, and hearing the different words they have for different terminology and the words they might have for, I don't know, a drag queen or a transvestite or a trans person or whatever. It differs geographically and also personally. And yeah, I mean, even for myself, again, personally, even words like the F slur, it rhymes with maggot, that can be used, I mean, I've used that with my friends in a comical way because we feel comfortable using that word. But again, for many people, that could be seen as a very like harmful and negative word. But it really, language is so personal, and it's about, I think, being aware of that and being like open to the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's, yeah, I think you've all beautifully answered that, and it comes down to identity, personal identity, and your own boundaries, and also intent as well. And I think a couple of you touched on that as well. You can use a word, and depending on how you are, you know, the context, that completely changes it, and it is fascinating. And we probably could sit here for ages and talk about this. But I've got another question which we really want to move on to very, very, very quickly. So our films, obviously, we are very proud of them and very happy with them. However, there are lots of people that aren't represented in the films, namely Black people, people of colour, and trans communities. And that predominantly comes down to gaps in our collection, to be honest, and we are incredibly aware of that. And the onus is on us and as an organisation to reach out and do a lot of work with the appropriate people and start doing research and start opening up our collections and our programming. So I just want to very quickly highlight this, and it was probably very apparent to everybody watching our films as well, that you know, representation is obviously really important, and you know, a lot of our films, a lot of our interviewees were like, well, representation is important. You want to see yourself. You want to see yourself in books. You want to see yourself in films. And so I just want to, Katusha, can I come to you, because this sits in line with some of your research interests around queer language and Black identities. So can you comment on that very quickly around, you know? Really? I know.
Okay,
right?
really quickly. I just would like to say that people of color, Black people, and I'm saying Black people from my community and those spaces that I navigate, we exist since humanity exists. So I mean, I understand that it's hard to find, oh my God, but where are they? We didn't have the time because the time frame, couldn't find them and they were traveling. I mean, this is not enough anymore. So we exist. We are here. We are not going to disappear. Yeah, I love that. Yeah. That's pretty quick. I mean,
that was great.
That's it. Like lazy kind of arguments is not working anymore.
No, I absolutely agree. I think that was a very excellent answer, and you made it rhyme as well, which was just quite a skill. Yes, there we go. There we go. So thank you. Apologies that we're just a bit tight for time, but we just want to highlight this is the start of the conversation. We're not doing this and then being like, full stop, all done. This is the start of the conversation, and we want to continue these, and we want to engage with these conversations and be very open about it. So I just wanted to highlight that. That's not a put in a box now. So I'm going to come to my colleague Gronya, who may have some questions for the panel.
We do have, we'll open it up to the floor in a couple of minutes, but we've got some lovely comments coming in from our very chatty online audience. So thank you, folks. Lots of praise and thanks for the screening and for the panel discussion. From Matthew Decana, Kristen Nielsen, lots of clap emojis, Robin Haggard, fantastic film, so wonderful to see Queer Joy. Couple of quick fire questions. Will the films be available to view again somewhere else?
So they're all on the National Gallery's YouTube channel for free, and it's an open channel, so we are not planning on taking them down. So yes, absolutely, that is where they are, and they're linked from our website as well. So yes.
And Stephen Wren has asked, who did the voiceover of the films?
Afton Moran. They are fantastic. Glasgow-based actor. They're fantastic.
Brilliant, thank you. So we have a question from Kristen Nielsen, who asks, what types of things go into consideration whether to, I think this is out an historical artist. So to put somebody into that, you know, re-examine their histories and start to talk about them as a queer artist. So what type of considerations go into that process?
Yeah, and it's a very complex one and also a simple one at the same time, and that's why the question was asked in the film. Like, is it ever okay to retrospectively out someone? And I guess the simple answer to that is no. If you feel that you don't have permission or enough information, or evidence isn't the right word, but I suppose if we're talking about material matter from an artist, then it is evidence about, you know, how they lived and how they identified. I think it is quite a complex process, and I think it's a balance. If within the sort of research you're like, oh, not quite sure, it's an if, then probably don't do it. But if there's enough where you're like, well, actually, there's a real sense where that person was identifying a certain way, and revealing that through their artwork or their writings or just in their lives, like we're looking at John Eardley's letters there, you know, then that's a very strong piece of evidence. Would be like, well, okay, there we go. That is a very strong story that we really want to get out there and we want to share with people, because it comes back to the balance between representation and then hiding again. And I guess it comes to the bigger question, which we're not going to talk about today. Whose decision is that to make? I don't have the answer to that, and I don't think I'm in a position to answer that. It's not my question to answer. Can I open this out to the panel?
Very quickly, I completely agree. I think it's a very difficult and touchy subject, and I think, as you say, there is no concrete answer to it. But I think the bottom line for me personally is that I think it's important that these artists' work is shown to as wide an audience as possible, and these discussions are had. There's the ethical question of, is that right? But I don't really think at any point there's concrete, cut and dry, this person was queer. It's more of a discussion of, there's evidence suggesting this may be the case, and this goes back, all throughout our history, right back to, Caravaggio or the Italian masters, about discussion about their sexuality. So I think it's more important that the discussions are had and it's not just hidden away.
Do we have to? Would anybody else like to come in on that question? No.
Should we open it up to the floor? We've got roving microphones. I was going to say raving. Please wait till the microphone comes to you so that our viewers online can hear the question. This chap here.
Hi. Hi. Can I ask the panel, are you frightened or hopeful for queerness going forward? Big question.
I mean, currently I'm very frightened, but I comfort myself that the pendulum will always swing far enough one way and it will have to swing backwards. I think with increased representation of queerness in society and of queer people, I think there will always be a fight back. And I think right now, obviously, there's a very toxic debate around gender. And for me personally, as a drag performer, there's very toxic debates around drag existing. There's currently bans of drag in some states in America, which is absolutely awful, and discussions around drag being around children. And I think it's just I think we are in a particularly toxic place right now. I don't know what the solution is other than just being visible and fighting back. That's what I believe. But I am hopeful that things will get better. But I'm a positive person.
Me too. I can't just say, oh, yes, everything is going to be so fine. I'm a black woman, please. This is... But from the genealogy of queer people, and here I'm being very purposeful. Using queer, I'm talking about all the dissident identities and categorizations of gender and sexuality and everything in the spectrum of dissidency here. C. Riley Norton wrote the book Black on Both Sides. And it's one of my favorite books, and they start talking about the start of trans surgeries and how that was painful to enslaved bodies in the US in a particular time. I'm just situating this in history to say from what was in the past to what is now. I believe we need to give credit to many people who came before to open the path for this panel to be happening, and we don't have the police coming and, you know, like, but at the same time, we need to acknowledge that we haven't stopped dying, and we haven't stopped being killed, and we haven't stopped being silenced and marginalized and so many other things, not just because of queerness, but all the intersections that are part of it, and that includes racism. So I am hopeful that together we can do better. And I'm hopeful and I'm optimistic to claim, like, cis people, white people, like queer lives, black queer lives, people of color queer lives matter, and we need to address this. So thank you for this dialogue, because it's important, and it's also important that you were present to be part of it. So I really appreciate that.
I'll jump in there and just say that I completely agree. I think the key word you said there is being together, and I think that regardless of your gender or sexuality, I think it's so important to be an ally against homophobia, transphobia, racism, sexism, and at any point in your life, if you ever see it, it's calling it out and being an ally. I think it's so important.
Jules, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I'll be quick, shall I?
Just quick, just 2 words.
My fellow panellists are saying it so beautifully. What comes to mind for me is that I imagine that change has been made by scared people. And so, great question. Are you afraid or are you hopeful? I think you can be both. I think we use that fear. We use the shame that people want to put on you. I mean, you can toss it off. But you can use that fear to do something and to let it be the reason that it matters to be hopeful and create hopeful change. So let's not be afraid of the fear. Let's not let it push us away to the sidelines, underground. We don't need the coding in the same way anymore.
Yeah. Beautiful. That was great.
There's been a lot of talk about representation and everything, and as a black woman, obviously, that's like really important, especially in gallery spaces. But do you also think there's a point to who tells the stories as well, and sort of how can we make that change and create like communities, like especially amongst curators in like spaces like cultural labour that doesn't actually open up to marginalised communities as well. How do we let those stories be told by people who understand it personally as well?
Brilliant question, and I'm going to let the panel answer that, but I think absolutely it does come down to the voices. The word voices is used a lot in museums and galleries, like, you know, it gets thrown around, but it's so important, and it's about lived experience and that question you've just asked, who's telling the story and who's best placed to do that. And it's really, really reflecting on that and making efforts and putting things into place where that is allowed and that is part of the norm and it's not an exception. So, you know, collaborations, co-production, co-curation, and also just really reflecting and interrogating workforces as well. That's you know, and institutions really need to look inwardly at that as well. So I think that's a great question. I would like to open up to the panel.
Can I jump in? You know, what was coming to mind for me about this project, which is fantastic. Could it have been delayed? Could the curators of this project have said what Frances McDormand did when she got her Oscar? Inclusion rider. So could there have been a discussion that asked the question, do we have the representation? Is it enough? Are the right stories being told? Have we got the voices that we need to tell this story meaningfully? And if we don't, let's wait and let's do the work. And then we do it. And I think sometimes what happens, I'm asking just, it's kind of, you know, it's a pointless question to ask now because it's been made, but I wonder if like we need to take more time over it and we need to have those conversations right at the beginning of when funding is being sourced, where we speak to funders and we say, I do want to do this. This is really meaningful, but I want to do it right. So the time frame that we've set out for this isn't enough, or the money we have isn't enough, because we're going to need to go and look further and do more work and do more research. So maybe if we had those conversations, then the outcome and the product changes. Maybe.
It's so important to have someone else saying, because as a Black woman, it's exhausting to say, where are we? But again, yes, yeah, we've been existing for a while now, so yeah, we exist. But it's still, we remain out. I just wanted to say something that you reminded me with this comment of a song that we have in Brazil. I'm going to do a loose translation here. It is about hunger. Brazil is still back after the lockdown, back in the map of the hunger in the world. And because of that, there was a song saying, we don't need only food, we need food, music, and joy. We don't need only food, we want electricity, we want the policies, and we want sex. And we don't need only food, we want pleasure, and we want, so on and so on. So I just wanted to say that when inviting the voices of representation, you know, with the intent to provoke something that is meaningful, not only a token. Because as a people who have been marginalized, we don't need just being there, but we also need to be paid. We also need to be to have the pleasure to be there, to share the joy, and I'm just saying that the work is not just inviting someone; it's being meaningful. And I just wanted to say that in the context of being invited to be here, there have been conversations before and intentions to how we are going to do the inclusion and how we are going to do the conversation, and that changes the game. Right? So I just wanted to say this because it's not just representing people of color or the dissident, but be meaningful in how you generate the dialogue and continue doing that. Yeah, with pleasure, with smiles and warmth. Yeah.
No, I completely agree. And I think you raise a really important point that in the gallery spaces around the world and in the art history that we're taught at university, it is dominated by white cis men, and those who are discussing the art are also white old cis men as well. And I think it's so important to have the voices, as you say, to have diverse voices that can involve their own experience and their own knowledge to discussing the art. I mean, how many of these works that we've seen in the films have probably previously been analysed as not queer? It's just two very close friends. They're not queer, but I think it's so important to have the voices who are, as I say, are diverse to bring their truth to that discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was beautifully answered. And yeah, do we have time for one more? That's time? We've got the tea time. Well, just wanted to say a big thank you. And before we wrap up, Katusha has got an event that she'd like to share.
Yes, please. Thank you so much. Please, we have been having a lot of hate lately, and to celebrate Women's History Month, we are inviting Midro Vaudois, who is a CEO of Edinburgh Rape Crisis, and she's just brilliant. It is an honor to have her at University of Edinburgh this Thursday, 23rd of March at 4 p.m. We managed to get hold of the anatomical lecture theater for the event. And it's going to be provocative. Yeah. It is, Midro is a trans woman from India. She is amazing. The event is about the Women's History Month, as I mentioned, but the title she chose was Inclusion is Beautiful, but Including is Ugly. So I think it will be speaking directly to the conversations we had today. And more than anything, I would like to invite you to hold the space where Midro will be able to speak safely. So please join us. You are going to be able to find information on our website, raceed.ed.ac.uk. It's a RaceEd network. That's the network I'm part of. But if it's too complicated, well, I bet the National Gallery will be posting on social media about this event, please. I just put you in a position now. And the Lighthouse books you're going to find on the social media. Thank you.
Kudos, I respect that so much. I think Sophie, our social media person, might still be here, maybe not. Anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you both.
It's been a really wonderful, important conversation. It is just the tip of it, so we really, really, really want to keep having these conversations. But I would just like to say a really huge thank you to Rue, Katusha and Jules for joining us today and sharing their expertise, their very personal opinions, and I think what you've added to not only the existing content that we shared today, you've really added a lot to where we're going to go in the future and the conversation we're going to have, but not just that, very tangible outcomes in terms of what we're going to be doing. So really, really massive thank you. Also thank you to you. So lovely to see so many people. And also to everybody online who I just always think is like they're just there. So a massive thank you, and we hope to see you all very soon. And the videos are on YouTube, so if you'd like to rewatch them, please do. Thank you.